I think there's two things that spring to mind. Number one is steam, and number two is steam. So it's just as we heard earlier today. I mean, steam is still probably one of the most powerful forces for getting heavy oil, especially and ultra heavy oils, out of the ground. And there's been a lot of capex, opex put into maintaining that momentum on the steam side. And then the other side, I think, is really the study on asphaltenes and understanding the chemical properties of the product as it's coming out. And there's been some real good investments and some progress there over the years. I mean, I took a delegation from Kuwait to the heavy oil study research center in Edmonton way back in the day, and it's interesting that they're still studying a lot of the same things now as they were back then.
What's your view, Robert?
I like steam, but I think that there's a number of other technologies out there that have the chance to even displace steam right now. A lot of that comes into the solvents and other ideas. And not necessarily is steam going to work in every reservoir out there. There's so many variations and calculations that have to be done inside of it. What we find is often we throw a stone at something and thinking it's going to work, but in essence it doesn't. We've seen many failures with trying to apply a certain type of technology.
And Sammy, from your perspective, looking through the lens of business here, how has this technological advancement and this disruption impacted how you do business in recent years?
So if you look back at PDO specifically, look at some of the medium to medium heavy oil production. Take Marmol, for example, where we started the polymer injection back in 2010, and we produced up to 18 million barrels of oil from there. And then we take Van Alem steam, where we start injection of steam in a carbonate reservoir, it's a very fractured reservoir. 2011, we produced 83 million barrels of oil from the reservoir, and in Amal, we are producing up to close to 20,000 barrels per day of oil today. All these have happened because the single enabler in all those is the technology breakthrough. So we have got polymer, ASP, steam, that has really helped us unlock these reservoirs. And looking forward, it is not only these technologies, but also the more complex chemical ASPs type of technologies that we are looking into to unlock the even more difficult oil, the likes of Nimmer and so on. So it is a widespread of technologies one has to actually exploit to be able to unlock the reservoirs.
So there's more than one solution out there. How would you say that industry is responding to these new advancements in technology? Is there some kind of a resistance out there to new tech, new trends, or is there a widespread embrace of the new types of methods that we see out there?
I think the industry is forthcoming with many solutions. In fact, just speaking from at home at PDO, you look at any one time of the day, we are trialing something like 80 different technologies, and that's because, and together with the academia, the service providers, they're all coming up with different solutions to unlock heavy oil or medium oil as well. Across the whole face of the production chain. So it's not only about only in the area of subsurface, but also into injection conformance, whether it is to do with lift mechanism, whether it's with the integrated operations, and you find different technology providers coming forth with different solutions. In fact, PDO, together with the industry, have this platform called Ijad, which you may have seen the booth there, which allows the industry to actually come up with solutions which together collaboratively we can crack problems.
And maybe one for Robert and Brian. What do you think the biggest gap is out there? Is there still a major problem that technology hasn't been able to solve, or a number of problems that technology hasn't been able to solve? And where is that gap for the operators?
Well, thanks, Robert. I guess the easiest answer for me to address is looking toward the future. I mean, over the years, civilization's been continuing to evolve, and there's always been the push for new technology, right? I mean, we had the first industrial revolution, which was harnessing steam power. The second industrial revolution, which is moving through manufacturing. The third, industrial revolution, which really was computing power and the information age that we came in. And I honestly feel that we're well, I think the industry feels as well that we're moving into what's called Industry 4.0, which is the fourth industrial revolution. And it's really now harnessing, Moore's law as it continues to accelerate. And how do we capture and engage the information that we have that we're drowning in now? We've managed to put in sensors and ways to capture information. And there's an adage that data that we have now, it's the cheapest resource we have, but it's also the most valuable. And I think it comes down, it's a real good way to say that how do we use it, right? How do we put it to work? And I think that's what the fourth industrial revolution really is about, is now trying to transform and capture this information and make it work for us, make it harness it to actually reap the benefits. And I think that I guess I would say that from an operator's point of view, maybe that infrastructure and the investment on that is not getting the return on investment that they would like to have. But certainly there's a lot of fascinating things that are coming with machine learning and the advent of digitalization that will certainly help us to do more with less moving forward.
So what are the solutions that Industry 4.0 will be able to bring to heavy oil?
Heavy oil, as these guys will know much better than I, is actually quite complicated in terms of the amount of components and assets that are required. So digitalization is, I'll give you an example of Google Maps. When Google started driving cars around and recording everything, really what they're doing was digitizing the environment around them. And with that digitalization, we all capitalize on now, right? We're all using Google Maps or Waves or some other navigation tool. That navigation tool helps us to do what? It helps us to be more efficient with where we're going, right? Because now we're starting to see traffic patterns, and we can choose our routes, and we can go places quicker than we could if we just went blindly and followed the same old route we always did. And that's what digitalization is going to do for us in the industry. We're now digitizing and creating smart digital twins that then we can take all the information out of refinery, facility, gathering centers, pipelines, and so forth, and capture the data that's in there, and then translate that into the efficiencies just like you do now when you use your devices, your maps to travel around with. So it's a way to lead us down the path towards taking the data that we're swimming in and putting it to use for us.
And Maha has some of this tech, right?
Oh yes, I'm a huge data guy. I absolutely love data. But going back to that first question of what can we leverage, so data is a huge piece of it, and the more data that we can actually collect and tangible data that we can collect, the more we hear what the reservoir is doing. But there's a piece of that and it maybe comes down to the smart machines again. What I've seen is having a number of labs reporting to me is sometimes people don't take into context of what the reality is of it. They rely too much on the simulators and different things. When I was doing one of the combustion floods that I was inside of, I had all my PhDs run up to me and say, look, we've got this, we've ran it multiple times, we have stable oil over gas over water. And it's like, no, you don't. We've missed something inside of here, let's go back and look at it. And I've seen that time and time again where people have the tools available to us, we have the data inside of it, but there's a piece that we've lost in being able to use our heads. We rely too much on the technology, and we have to have that blend. Have to have the data, but we have to have the intelligence to go with it, to match it. The other part I was going to say, and technology is fantastic, but the other part that sort of hampers us too is on the economics themselves, right? It's a matter of what do we want, when do we want it. A number of different places around the world, there's sometimes that a concession has a limited time span, so people do not invest in it over the long period of time. At the same time, the government always wants to make sure that investment is occurring and new technologies are coming forward. So it's a blending of how they do it. And Oman is fantastic for that because they're trying to blend that.
Sammy, do you have an experience at PDO that you could share with regards to the implementation of tech and whether or not it went really well or whether it went the wrong way?
It's a risk that you should be prepared to take. And many of the trials, yes, have not gone well, and we've certainly learned from that. But I think the key thing is not only there should be a technical solution, it should be a commercially fit solution as well, right? So the technology should be able to be, we need to be cost competitive as well. Yes, there can be a solution for everything, but if you're not going to doesn't make economic sense, then you can't proceed further. So there are technologies that are of that nature, and there are some technologies that have failed technically. as well. So I think that's where the gap is, to be able to actually make a technology work in the full development cycle, so that it supplements the whole development cycle. But also another aspect of I think we should think about is that once you're solving one issue about the development through technologies, there are other aspects that we need to consider also as well. Like, okay, you solve production, but with production comes a lot of water. What do you do with all that water? With that, you increase the carbon footprint. What do you do with carbon footprint increase? So you need technological solutions to supplement and complement those issues as well. I think a good example of success is the Mirror project that PDO has implemented, where we basically need to get the steam in the ground. Now, if you basically get your direct fired gas boilers and burn a lot of gas, instead of doing that, we put a massive solar plant there, the Mirror project. And that is a beautiful example of how you can solve one issue of developing heavy oil, complementing it with a renewable resource, and you come up with a full development. Another good example is the Nimor wetlands operated by Bauer Nimor, where together with heavy oil comes a lot of water. And today we are able to dispose all that water, approximately 1 million barrels of water, through a solution which is like a fraction of of the cost and energy usage that we would otherwise do. So you need to constantly look at solving problems with technological solutions all around in a complete chain, rather than just one aspect.
I also wanted to ask about the sustainability aspect, because I think that's particularly interesting. If you look at the PDO example, 40% of the base, as I understand it, is heavy or ultra heavy, and so sustainability is really important moving forward. How are we leveraging technology to improve recovery in a sustainable way? And how much of that thinking actually goes into making a decision about a technology acquisition or implementation?
So that is, that's at the top of our agenda. So when you're basically looking at solutions, you're thinking about the planet and the people as well to go with it. I think the example that I just gave on the wetlands, so it solves the problem of disposing water, but it is such an environmentally friendly way of disposing water, and it helps Oman actually in meeting its targets of what it had agreed to the Paris Agreement. So I think the agreement was like a 2% reduction in GHG, and of that, 4% is already met by that one single project. So that becomes a very strong element of your solution, of your chain of solutions.
What about from a more internal perspective as well? What about when it comes to preparing staff? Is there anything that staff need to know?
Just in general, well, staff, I believe learning and knowledge is powerful, not power. So one of the major things that I believe strongly is that everyone needs to have an open form of communication, because it's, no matter how smart one person is, having two people work together is always going to be smarter. So you always use that. You throw different ideas against each other. You embrace silly thoughts, if you will, and you allow that ideas to come out, because all of a sudden you just need one little grain that comes out of something to generate a brand new idea that's fantastic. And going back to the renewables, another company I was working with, we were investigating the idea of using terpenes as a solvent in combination. That way we're bringing in the renewable energy. And working with Apostles Kansas and John Bryan, we actually stumbled upon a new type of recovery process, which is currently patented, or being patented, that we have 98% recovery factor in heavy oil carbonates that are oil wet, and nobody's produced from that yet, and yet the applications go way beyond that. But it's a matter of conversations and saying, how can we do that? What new changes are coming in there? How do we embrace environmental impacts? How do we do different things?
What about when you, sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to come back to a point that you made earlier, Robert, when you were describing you had some staff that was trying to interpret this, this model they were looking at, which seemed, upside down or not possible. And I think that alludes to a good point that, as managers in the future, and the things we need to consider is education and training. We need to continue to aspire that our educational systems are teaching critical thinking, because it's going to become more and more and more important as we start to get answers pushed at us from machines or from software or from other places. Doesn't make sense, right? What's my benchmark? What's my decision criteria? And how could this happen? Is it worthwhile? Instead of taking things at face value. And I think that's a real threat, and maybe there's parents out there like me who see that coming too. The kids are just seeing what comes on the screen now, and they're not thinking about what it means. And so I think we need to be conscious of that and make sure that as the younger generations come up and they come into the workforce, that we have the capability to mentor them, to advise them, and to ensure that critical thinking aspects are going to be present, or else they're not going to be the employees and the staff that we would certainly like to have working for us.
What about when you look at this from a more international perspective? When it comes to using technology and enabling technology to build out recovery, is there a country that leads the pack, or a best-in-class example that you might be able to provide? And how is Oman doing in particular when it comes to this process?
I think it's not one country that you can point out. I think it's a matter of joint industry effort. It's a matter of collaboration at all levels, whether it's at staff level, technology levels. That is what's going to make the breakthrough, and that's what actually raises the performance. I think the world that we are in, and the way everything is digitalized and we are so well connected, we can actually exploit the technology a lot more by better collaboration, whether it's with academia, whether it's with service providers, whether it is with operators. And I think that's where the opportunity lies. And forums like these, or virtual forums that are there existing, focused laboratory efforts joined together, having global SMEs that can work across the operators. I think that's where we can actually if we can leverage that a lot more, then I think everyone will be benefiting, and not just one particular country.
Is the Middle East as a region leading the pack, would you say?
I think it plays a very strong role. We've seen the the numbers earlier about the opportunity that lies here. I think obviously places like US and Canada, especially in Canada, we've got ultra heavy oil, which we do not necessarily have. We've got more medium to medium heavy. But I think, as Dr. Farooq was saying, is that if you look at it's great here.
I wanted to, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that I agree. Like talk about the ultra heavies and everything else. Like Canada, which I grew up in, was where I learned so many different technologies, because Canada has the worst reservoirs and the worst oil in the world, and so we had to learn how to make that economic. But then what ended up happening is that we learned how to do it. And in Canada, because of different situations, we haven't been able to further that anymore, because we're landlocked with our oil. We can't get it out, and it stops. And when that stops and you don't have that ability to generate that technology, you can't generate new EOR technologies. So that's where countries like Oman have come over. When I was at CNRL, they'd come and try to learn how to do polymer flooding from me, because I developed the Pelican Lake field. And we started to learn it, and so it was that collaborative effort that came in. But we talk about Oman and saying you don't have that ultra heavy oil. I look at Habhab, which I've looked at. That's 500,000 centipoise at reservoir temperatures. That's incredibly heavy. It's probably the most complicated reservoir that's out there, and yet there's a strong desire by many of us that we think that we can develop it, and that's going to be cutting edge technology, and I think it really can be done. So I think that Canada was leading it, but now I actually look to places like Oman, where they have the ability to finance, they have the desire to develop those technologies. I think see Canada falling behind. I see Venezuela falling way behind, and the technologies are being developed here.
Just before we wrap it up, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to perhaps leave some parting advice to the stakeholders who are present in the room when it comes to enabling and using new technology for recovery. What's the one thing that you'd like our audience to remember as they walk away today? Go for it.
That's a very good question. I guess we've spoken about so many different components, right? The affordability, the accessibility, even the levels of, the country level where it seems to be growing, and we didn't get into the places where it's not, but certainly the Middle East has a lot of tremendous momentum in terms of the technology uptake, which I hope continues. And I feel it probably will. There's so much to be gained. There's just have an open mind. Be willing to listen. There's nothing, maybe a little bit of time that you invest to learn about something new that maybe will change your life. So continue to embrace, to embrace change. Don't be dead set against it, but try to, think about the things and have a critical, certainly have a critical mindset when you're being told about things. But ask good questions. I think that you'll discover there's some good answers.
I think very much what Brian was saying. The oil and gas industry is always pretty slow in catching up, and I think we need to embrace the digitalization journey much faster than what we are doing at this moment in time. So that, I think, is one. And the second thing is, I think the technological solutions that we have today have to become more cost competitive. The alkaline surfactant polymer, I mean, it's pretty expensive stuff, and we need to get it, as Dr. Farooq was also saying, competitive to shale. So to get that to happen, it has to be a lot more cost competitive than it is today.
Do you think it ever will be, though?
I think we are heading in the right direction. It just requires constant focus and attention. And as I think the price is quite large, and if it is rightly in the right terms of development, contracting strategies, then there can be win-win solutions.
Did you want to put a time frame on it when you actually see that? No, when we might actually see those costs starting to align.
Well, for us,
how far away is that pivot
I mean,
point?
have we been in PDO trying for quite some time, as Excellency also mentioned, and I think we're looking now at the industry to solve solutions, come up with solutions. But I think local in PDO, for us, the time frame is pretty short. We need the oil not tomorrow, today.
Very interesting.
For me, what I say is the most important thing. The one nugget is, as we talked about, is to become, if you've heard of the term being a horse whisperer, it's more being a reservoir whisperer. Quite often what we end up doing is we have this one idea and say, we want to put this type of steam injection into this reservoir. Instead, what we need to do is we need to take the time to listen to the reservoir, see what it's telling us, not ignore certain pieces of data. I've seen multiple times that we look at 3/4 of the data and something doesn't agree with our principles, and we throw it out. Nope, it's exactly this way, and then we go ahead and do that, and then we stumble, and we can't get the reservoir to work the way we want it to. But the reservoir itself was trying to tell us what it needs, and if we listen to it and we talk and brainstorm, we can develop.
Any advice on listening to the reservoir?
It actually comes back to experience, right? We have the data. We can't rely on simulators. We have to have our people all trained together and very, very diversified so that we can say, oh, well, polymer worked here. Solvent worked here. We want to do chops here. Here we want to use a sand pack. Here we don't. We have to know what works in different places and then be able to experiment, be able to tie in together, and then say, we thought about that other thing that was going on a little while ago. Why don't we bring that back to life and try that here? It comes down to experience. It really does.
Fascinating stuff. Gentlemen, I really appreciate the conversation today, and thank you so much for joining us, Robert, Sammy, and thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
That was great.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the panelists and moderator for their valuable contributions. We will now move to our next panel discussion, where we'll be taking a look at how we can develop a robust value chain, in particular when it comes to advancing innovation in refinery operations, infrastructure and technologies, and fuel marketing networks for maximum value products. Please join me in welcoming to the stage our moderator, Bashar Hussein, CEO of Vista Projects. Since joining Vista, Bashar has managed engineering design for a variety of enhanced oil recovery methods.
You would like me to introduce myself? You would like me to introduce myself? You will. Yeah, so you would like me to introduce the panelists? Yeah. I don't know whether it will work. It's working? It's working? Okay, good. Sorry, I thought. Thank you, folks, for being here. I would like to introduce Ari.
Yeah,
Am I pronouncing it accurately?
very well.
Good. So you are mic'd in.
Yes.
Can you go and introduce yourself, Ari?
Yes.
Right.
Hello. My name is Yuri Hayek, and I'm representing the Unipetrol Center for Research and Education, which is an integrated part of PKN Orlen, the largest oil downstream processing company in Central and Eastern Europe. We are mainly focusing on processing on Russian export blend. Nevertheless, our major focus nowadays is basically focusing on valorization of the heavier products, while at the same time integrating alternative and bio feedstock to the portfolio of our refinery inlet and outlet materials.
Thank you, Ari.
You're welcome.
You reached the second one, which is much smarter than me. I just met
I
him
don't think so.
maybe 15 minutes back, and I learned a lot from him. Go ahead.
I'm Girish Srinivas. I'm Vice President at TDA Research. We're about a 100-person company in Colorado in the US, and we develop all kinds of materials and process technologies. And specific to the conference, we develop sulfur removal technologies as well as heavy oil conversion technologies. So look forward to talking with you.
Thank you. So I have to warn you, Dan did very good job in moderating, and I may not be able to do what Dan did. So in fact, we are talking about the value chain in heavy oil and the innovation and the regulation leading to the innovation in heavy oil. And I would like to start with asking you guys a question. We will try to make it interactive. And the question is, by raising hands, how you see the future of heavy oil. If it is brighter, please raise your hand. If it is not, don't raise your hand. We are now 10%. 10%. Okay. I think we will repeat the question again by the end of this panel, and I hope there is a change in your prospect about what heavy oil future is, because it's really brighter. In my opinion, heavy oil is future. Otherwise, you tell me that my PhD, when I selected a PhD in heavy oil upgrading, I made a big mistake. In 1995, when I picked heavy oil, I was thinking about, wow, oil, sweet, light, it will be disappearing in the future, and the best thing is to think about heavy oil. So 10% was supporting me. I hope we will change this prospect in the future. Talking about heavy oil.
Right.
Now, heavy oil, my question was, I'm from Canada. Well, originally I'm from Iraq, but now I live in Canada. And Girish is from US. And we have Europe here, so we need your prospect by that interactive discussion. Heavy oil, we mean heavy oil, and when we call it heavy oil, in Kuwait, I heard it's about 20 API, I think, and they call it heavy. In Canada, we have 6 APIs, and that's our heavy oil. How you guys see heavy oil in this global market and how heavy oil will impact on the overall energy spectrum, mainly fossil fuel. Krish?
I think my sort of perspective, and we were talking about this just before we started this panel, my perspective is that, and as some of the presentations earlier today has showed, there's plenty of heavy oil around the world. And the question is, how do we utilize that? I think in general, we have been spoiled, and I say spoiled in sort of in a categorical way, by being able to utilize sweet crude, especially in this part of the world. And I think that as we continue to process sweet crude, we should probably think about investing in technologies that will develop the heavy oil, because in some ways it's a hedge against the utilization of sweet crude. And if we finish all the sweet crude, then you're left with heavy oil. Unless we invest in technologies, we won't know how to process it in an economical fashion. So I think, and this conference, this is my second time attending this conference, and I think this conference goes a long way in letting everybody know that heavy oil is important for us to invest in it. So I think there's a bright future in heavy oil, as long as we invest in technologies that take and make it economical to use.
Heavy oil, in European perspective, are just being today facing, let's say, tremendous transition towards different applications. We were used to utilize these sort of materials, for instance, as bunker fuels, or utilize it in heavy industry, while nowadays, actually, the ambition is slightly different. People in Europe, they have a tendency to somehow diminish or basically reduce the applicability of the heavy oils, especially because of the sulfur content, and actually the European tendency oriented towards decarbonization somehow reduce the possibility to somehow explore the potential of heavy oils in, for instance, transportation sector. So what we are doing in these days is that actually we are trying to explore other innovative activities, or how to convert the heavy oils to something different. For instance, to petrochemicals. Like either we go via tremendous or complicated pathway from heavy oils to petrochemicals. I think that you will talk about conversion of heavy oils to hydrogen, which is another alternative. And also, let us conclude that actually in some parts of the world, the heavy oils will be either reduced, they won't be banned, but actually the applicability will be reduced. And we believe that actually they will be blended with, for instance, renewable type of feedstocks. And that's what we saw as well. So it's very likely that in upcoming days or in upcoming years, we will see investment in combination of the processes which will allow us parallel co-processing of heavy oils and renewable type of feedstocks or alternative type of feedstocks.
Yeah, before this panel, we were just talking about how different regions, they have different prospect about their fossil fuel, the wealth of fossil fuel they have. Everyone knows in Europe they don't have sufficient resources of fossil fuel, and therefore you see the movement toward decarbonization. It's mainly driven by, yes, people, they are conscious about the environment and the greenhouse gas emissions, but guys, remember, in 2015, when the oil price crashed, the consumption was overall consumptions was 93 million barrels. Today, it's around 100 million barrels. So there is an increase in fossil fuel consumption, despite of we have Teslas and lots of electrical cars driving around. Still, people cannot, like humanity, cannot decouple itself with the fossil fuels. And the decarbonization in Europe, maybe in some parts of Canada, it's just regional. I don't see it as a global movement. What do you think about it?
I think that's a very good point. I mean, it may be a good point here to bring in at this point how regional tendencies affect the processing of heavy oil. In the U.S., especially in Canada, we talked a lot about this in the earlier talks. Canada has a lot of heavy oil, and certainly has done quite a bit in trying to process the heavy oil. And likewise in the U.S., whether it's shale or whether it's tar sands up in Canada. Regionally, I think regional differences matter a lot. One of the things, I don't know if it's appropriate for us to bring in pricing at this point. A lot of it is blanketed, no matter how much a region or a country is interested or is emphasizing the processing of heavy oil and bringing in carbon emissions, etc. The whole thing is sort of blanketed by the pricing, and which is certainly regional. For instance, everything in the U.S. seems to be in the last decade or so governed by the price of natural gas. And so the perspective in the U.S., and I can certainly speak a little bit to that, is that anything and everything that is pertaining to heavy oil or upgrading or technologies that upgrade the heavy oil from a regional perspective has to be taken into consideration in the broad perspective of how much is it going to cost to process the heavy oil versus what does it cost to use natural gas as an alternative. And so I think regionally, from the U.S. perspective, I can certainly speak to that. So.
I would say that in Europe, again, this is the example which I can refer to. We are actually nowadays seeing a situation that actually, for instance, the refiners, they are exploring the alternatives to convert the heavy oils into the fuels, but actually those technologies are badly expensive. And actually, not everybody is willing to invest quite a lot of money with the potential income in 20 years. And actually, over the next 10 years, there's going to be let's say, some kind of prediction what will happen. Are we going to still produce bunker fuels, for instance? But if we don't produce the bunker fuels, do we have already any alternative? Well, for instance, with regards to the alternative, we can speak about condensates from pyrolysis of the waste tires. We can talk about condensates from pyrolysis of the waste plastics. These sort of materials can, let's say, replace the market with heavy oils. But from our perspective, those technologies are not matured yet. So it's still reasonable to believe that actually the heavy oils will be utilized in upcoming at least 1 or 2 decades. The question is what will be the proportion and regionally where.
Right.
Yeah, the investment aspect is also important. Without the investment, we can't develop technologies or even build projects. I can speak for Canada. Between 2001 and 2008, I think there was about $30 billion per year investment in heavy oil production, whether it is by mining or cyclic steam, SAGD operation, or polymer flooding, 2015. Now, guys, think about it. Mainly fossil fuel is produced for transportation, whether it is by shipping, airplanes, or cars. Now there is a movement transferring, the cars transportation into electrical, but airplanes will not fly on solar or batteries. It is in fact uneconomical to have batteries in airplanes because eventually you will not gain weight. You can't gain speed by reducing the weight of airplane as it burns the fuel, as well as shipping industries. We will not go back to wind, to sail in the oceans. Therefore, the fossil fuel, in my opinion, production will increase. Maybe it will slow down. The ratio of the percentage of the increase will slow down, but still the population is growing, and investment should come back to this sector. And here I'm talking about Canadian perspective. If we have pipelines, sufficient pipelines, there is a major political obstacles about pipelines in Canada. If we have major pipelines, Canada will double its production from 3 to 6 million barrels easily. Majority of the projects cost went down, and in fact, natural gas production with condensate.
Right.
Now we have more condensate, so we can use them as diluent at $48 per barrel. Projects in Canada, per installed barrel, it was about $50,000 investment per installed barrel. Typically, we do 30,000 to 50,000 barrels per phase. Currently, we are predicting, because we design all those facilities, our design now, which is the same design we were doing in years back, improved from different angles. The heavy oil is hedging against the sweet. Can you share that idea with us?
It's just my perspective that, just like everything else, if we look at it responsibly, both from an environmental as well as a economic responsibility that we have to our shareholders, to the government, to the company, it would make sense to protect the light crude, sweet crude that we have, if we are able to either mix, blend, or simultaneously process some of the heavy oil. In certain parts of the world, if you have partial upgrading of heavy oil, where you can blend it and you process it just enough so you can put it into the pipeline, for instance, like in Canada, you get the heavy oil either from mining or from SAGD. And if you can make dilbit, which in certain cases you've got your condensate that you can mix it, or you can mix it with synthetic crude that you can do that. My perspective is that responsible processing, both environmental as well as economic responsibility that we have to, whether it's the shareholders or to the government or to the oil company, it would make sense for us to co-process the heavy oil, even though there might be an abundance of sweet crude. That's just my perspective. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, for sure. I mean, you don't want to exploit your entire reservoirs of sweet crude and suddenly just ended up with the heavy oils. I mean, you are not ready for that. So actually, you need to take some time to adapt to the situation that, for instance, you design your refinery in the way that it will enable you to leverage your risk in the way that actually you are dependent on the supply of heavy oils as well as supply of lighter crudes. For instance, this is the approach which we are trying to adopt already for quite some years, since 1970, I guess, and it helps a lot. So actually, it reduces your dependency particularly on one source, while still keeping your margin relatively high, because co-processing of heavier oils is something where your margin is hidden, while upgrading of light sweet crudes to fuels, especially it becomes less profitable in European region in these days, to gasoline mainly.
That's right.
Yeah, another point I would like to drive to you guys. Oil companies is not that villain who we are just polluting the globe. Oil companies are responsible on all the ambulances driving from houses to hospitals, carrying sick people and trying to rescue their lives. Again, back in Canada, we were producing a barrel of oil by consuming 3 barrels of water. Currently, we are producing a barrel, that was about 15 years back. Currently, we are producing a barrel of oil by consuming 180 liters of water, which is 0.18 barrel of oil. So we come way in being environmentally responsible and produce oil in more responsible manner. Despite in Canada, we have 20% of the world fresh water, by the way. Still, we are very consciously looking into developing our resources and consuming less of resources to produce a barrel of oil. Now, do you guys think, this is a question to you, and again, by raising hand, do you think the innovation leads the environmental and regulatory requirements, or vice versa? So let me to ask the question differently. Do you think that regulatory drives the innovation in heavy oil industry? So if it is yes, please raise your hand. Okay, now that's about 5%. 95% thinks that the innovation is leading the regulatory and regulatory is lagging the innovation. Am I right? I'm expecting now 95% hands to go up. Well, that's another 5%. Where is the other 90?
They're still thinking.
Thinking.
They're still thinking.
It's both. Again, it's regional. Thank you so much. I think it's also regional. In Europe, I think regulatory requirements drives innovation. In other parts of the world, I think the innovation drives the regulatory requirements. And the IMO, it is the IMO, I call it Clean Seas Act. There is a reason why I call it Clean Seas Act. The International Marine Organization, they have this new standards for shipping fuel. Shipping fuel has about 3 to 3.5%, and correct me if I am wrong, I know it's about 3 to 3.
Yes, still have.
Still have, yeah, 3 to 3.5% sulfur in the bunker. And International Marine Organization, by 2020, they mandated that to be 0.5. Now, with the applicable technologies, if it is 0.5, you have to treat it either by vessel breaking or hydrotreating or whatever the technologies that typically used in upgrading. But that means you will reduce the volume of energy in a ton of or a barrel of oil that drives the ship. So new technology is being introduced or in development currently as we speak to meet that particular mandate. Now the other option is just blend it with diesel, which means it will drive up the bunker price, which means drives up all the shipping cost. International Marine Organization will follow up with them. So in certain areas, the innovation is leading the regulatory requirements, and in other areas, the regulatory requirements are leading the technologies. Now, what about, leading the innovations? What about the other innovations you see in heavy oil?
I'll perhaps use an example of, in the US, the government more and more recently, or if you go back 25 years ago, the oil companies invested a lot of money into a lot of innovation. What has happened around the globe is that we all understand that the return on investment is shifted to immediate returns on investment globally, whether it's the US or otherwise. And as a result of that, as a percentage of investment into research, the oil companies are spending less and less every year as a percentage of investment in research. In the US, the US government actually does fund quite a bit of research, but that's cyclic. And so years ago, they were funding heavy oil, as Dr. Ali had said, in the Carter administration, and even after that. But now they aren't funding as much. But as an example, we talked to a number of oil companies and said, what are your immediate needs? And if you could tell us your sort of ideal scenario, what would you do if you had a lot of heavy oil or for instance, vacuum tower bottoms in a refinery, VTB or ATB? What would you use it for? And they said, especially as they process more and more heavier and sour crudes, they said hydrogen would be a very important product. If we could convert it to hydrogen economically, that would be great. So we then leveraged some of the funding from the government and decided to develop a process. And we now, after about 8 years, have a patented process that we have where we take vacuum tower bottoms or ATB or any kind of fuel that is being either not underutilized in a refinery and convert it to hydrogen to top off the refinery or to use it in hydroprocessing. So that's just an example, and I can certainly only speak for the US perspective, that as the investment in technology that the refiners are continuing to underspend, we are looking to other resources to try and bring innovation. And certainly we hope to keep innovation leading the environmental regulation in the U.S. So that's sort of my perspective as far as the U.S. is concerned.
With regards to Europe again, the situation is not black and white. Well, I would say that actually we are now facing, let's say, the point where the European Commission is actually implementing, let's say, a new regulations which were, however, designed by the oil companies. So the oil companies are basically collecting their innovative ideas, made some common consensus, what should be the future of the quality of the fuels, and then try to promote this idea towards, let's say, the European Commission. And if European Commission applies or agrees on that it has some decarbonization drive, it has innovative drive, then they are willing to support the activities using the public funds. This is happening especially in Western region, while at the same time impose new regulations which will define, for instance, the IMO 2020 Act is basically defining that actually the entire production of heavy oils in Europe should be reduced, or especially we should talk about marine fuels. Over the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, there was a panic in Europe. What will happen? Are we ready? Everybody was actually in panic, and suddenly the year 2020 is just behind the doors, and not everybody adopted their technology to the production of low sulfur fuels. But actually we need to ask why, because the expectation is that in Europe we will still produce the bunker fuels by, like you already mentioned, by blending of diesel into the marine fuels, but this will only solve the problem in our region. The shipping industry is basically implementing the solutions which will enable us in the future to still deliver the heavy bunker fuels with higher sulfur content to the market, because if I understand correctly, their ambition is to install the technologies like scrubbers on the ships, and hereby they want to, let's say, give us a hand or give us a hint, which will enable us to sell again the heavy fuels to these kind of customers. So most likely, those who haven't invested yet will win, because they will be still able to deliver these sort of materials to the market without spending significant investment on heavy bottom upgrading or valorization. But this is just one part of the story. We also need to understand that actually there is some innovation with regards to the decarbonization, like we already said, and actually currently we are talking about the sulfur, but in the upcoming future we should expect also some reduction of carbon in the fuels that will be utilized even in transportation sector. Like you said, it's not likely that the plane will utilize the battery pack because it's body heavy, and actually simply the plane cannot bear such a weight on the board. But what is likely to happen is that actually some of these fuels will be replaced by some renewable materials. For instance, I'm not sure if you are familiar with the current situation in Sweden. Sweden is suffering this year, or let's say Swedish airlines are suffering from very low demand of the customers, and it's mainly because simply it's not popular to take the airplane in order to enjoy the vacation time somewhere in Mediterranean Sea for Swedish people. Simply the millennium generation is adopting, or actually it's rising a red flag, and actually as a consequence of that the SAS airlines are facing significant drop in their shares, just because we don't have the alternative yet, European region are nowadays heavily focusing on, can we produce liquid fuel, liquid hydrocarbon, for this industry which will have, let's say, a relatively low carbon footprint. And some of them are actually, some of the projects are in the flagship or demo stage of development, and very likely in the next 2 or 3 years we will see a replacement of the materials which were originally produced from, for instance, Russian export blend, which is considered as relatively heavy oil in the region. They will be just replaced by something which will be either produced from forest residue or from some other alternative renewable materials. So that's the situation which we can refer to.
Yeah, when I look to this, this subject, I think this shows the difference between central planning and market-driven planning. Market-driven planning tend to be looking for return on investment within the very short period of time, while the central planning economy, they think about the future. When I call it central planning, I don't mean US, they don't have central planning in this case. In fact, US, despite of its market-driven, but US government drives lots of innovation through central planning by giving grants. In fact, the major oil companies, they do lots of innovation and they think ahead years more than we expect them. Like in Canada, majority of the producers, whether it's Suncor or Cenovus or Husky Energy, all of them, they have now centers within their organization. They think about how they will improve their final product by reducing the cost of inputs and the cost of the propane. I'm not bragging about that. I fly my airplane because there is no way I will drive 1,000 kilometers to visit the next city. All our distances are huge. Therefore, we fly more than, because of the, the size of the country. In Europe, it will be much easier to take a train from Frankfurt to Duisburg than flying from Frankfurt to Duisburg. It will be 1 hour and 15 minutes, despite of going to the airport, waiting for maybe 1 hour, flying 1 hour, and then come out. It's the geography of Europe, it's different than the other parts. I think in the United States, like think about it in Alaska.
That's right.
In Alaska, they have airplanes are like motorcycles. They fly airplanes because simply it's huge, it's big, and they will look for oil and fossil fuel production. Now, demographically, all the growth in population, it's not happening in Europe. In fact, it's happening in Europe through immigration, but it's happening somewhere else. And those, the population will drive, I think, the oil consumption, and that will put pressure on light sweet.
Right.
And then you have the heavy oil as a hedging against the price of light sweet. If we don't have heavy oil, the light sweet producer will sell their oil for $100 per barrel. You can't tell them no. But because of the heavy oil availability and the abundance of heavy oil, there is a pressure on light sweet price. And now you have the natural gas. The abundance of natural gas is adding another price pressure on or cap on light sweet price. Like remember, guys, in 2008, the price of oil was $148 per barrel.
It's a third of that, or approximately.
It's about approximately a third of that now.
No.
Yeah.
You're right.
Now, transformation and digitalization. I have a technical speech 5 o'clock about using the digitalization in. No, I mean just for you guys, the digitalization in and data-centric approach in our industry. How you see the digitalization? When we had a good conversation about refineries and how use the digitalization in refining processes.
Let us look at it from 2 different perspectives. From the software and hardware perspective, we are seeing that actually the software, there are like small and medium-sized enterprises which are able basically to design whatever you want, what can easily improve your margins, what can easily improve your profit making. Nevertheless, on the other hand, the refiners are still simply, at least in Europe, those which have a long-term history, they are invested in terms of, let's say, provision of elements which can collect the data from your system. So what you essentially need is the hardware, and the hardware costs you a lot of money. So the question is now, can we improve your profession or improve our efficiency based on the data which we have at this moment? We would have do it already, or we would have done it already. But actually the problem is that you need the essential attribute, and this is the element, the hardware element in your refinery. And without that element, you simply cannot move any forward. And now the question is, how you justify that element? You want to justify it with the statement that actually within the next 10 years or within the next 15 years, you will generate a lot of money, but you will spend enormous millions of dollars in upcoming 2 or 3 years. This is something what the management doesn't want to hear. So the question is, can we somehow provoke this topic? And I believe that actually the companies like, for instance, Eni, BP, Total, Shell, they concluded that this sort of approach should be done from the top to the bottom. And this is what I like, and hopefully such an approach will be adopted also by other companies in the region, which will push us towards digitalization, because only hereby we can secure our future of our industry even for the next generation. Push from the other industry like energy sector or from renewable sector, let me put it this way, by industry.
I think, I know from sort of an innovation perspective as well, for people who are in the innovation sector, knowing or digitizing everything is you can change the process, how quickly you can utilize data almost instantaneously to either innovate a new process or to change the process that's already a new process, so it adapts itself to the refinery or to the oil and gas sector. So it's absolutely important, so, certainly. So. Yeah,
in fact, I agree with Yuri about the digitalizing a project exists, and running and collecting data is not that easy. In fact, it's cost prohibitive sometimes. However, with the advancement in technology, the price of the equipment and the gadgets is getting cheap to the point that you can deploy them fast and quick in refineries. And from my point of view, it's a matter of time. In Canada, we have small gadgets. We put them on compressors and pumps all over the the country, and collect data, and all those data get analyzed, and we know which pump needs some replacement or maintenance or checking because of the vibration increased in that pumps. And those gadgets are small. We have balls. You can drop them while you are building a pipeline, and it will give you the health of that pipeline over the next 25 years, because it will have sensors and detect what's going on in that pipeline. So I think it's a matter of time that digitalization will take us over for existing projects. For new projects, I think it's part of the new trend, because it's much easier to digitalize at the start of the project rather than trying to to do it by the end of or during the operation.
For sure, I fully agree with that.
Now, again, quick one. Do you think there's brighter future for heavy oil? Do we have more than 10%? Please, by raising hands. Wow.
Raise our hands here.
Well, that's incredible. No, good. I think we have a little bit bump in number of people who they see there is a brighter future for heavy oil. Now, do we have time for a few questions, or we are done? Do we have any questions? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Nasser Maharouki from PDO. I'm coming back to regulator and innovation. I think it's important for both of them to work together, because if you push so much on regulations, you may kill the innovation. And if you go too quick on innovation without bringing on board the regulators, there could be blocker ahead. So I think that communication and engagement is key for the success of this innovation. And I have seen it already in the ENP on the digitalization area. Things are picking up.
Yeah.
They could be faster than the way how they are. And what we're saying is the phrase which I normally use, the train is moving.
Yeah.
Digitalization is not an option. And when the train is moving, be part of it, or you're out of the business.
Yeah,
That's
I 100% agree with you. Yeah.
Yes, good point.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, we have another one there.
Stefan Imbert from Marling Dubai. I have a question, as you three of you expert in this field. How do you see the oil and gas industry in terms of operations with the digitalization in place at this stage today in the next 20 years?
Well, if I can elaborate on this, we are responsible not only for research but also for education. And actually, from our perspective, it is essential to secure that the knowledge and proposition of the engineers will be extended not only from the perspective of chemical engineering, but actually they need to be able to digest and work with the data. So the digitalization is one part, but actually as a customer or as a user, if you want to keep the system alive, you need to be able to let's say, work with the data in the most effective way. Just don't rely on your IT support when they make some modification. But actually, this is currently improving, let me put it this way, because as we are facing the millennials, which are now taking part in our industry, they are digital native, let me put it this way. And they are actually more active in terms of digitalization much faster, and they can handle these sort of things. So they can do even things which we were not able to do 10 years ago. The software is enhanced, basically the computer as well. So the young students or the young people which will run our industry in 10 to 20 years, I would say they are capable to work with that, and they are able to bring it up to the level where we see it, or which we assume today. But it's not likely that actually it can be done by the people which are in active role in these, or in managerial role in these days. So it must be done by the young generation. I'm not sure whether you share that opinion.
Did you have a follow-up comment? No, I agree. I agree 100%. And I think the other aspect here is that I think technological innovation will help safety. You know, we didn't get a chance to talk about safety, but I think that there are although safety has come a long way today compared to where it was, but I think that the digitalization and technology innovation will further improve safety to such a point that I think we will not, what we see today won't be the norm 20 years ago. But it's hard to predict what's going to happen, because we couldn't predict what's happening today 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. But I think that's another aspect. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thank you so much, guys, for your attendance, and I hope we increase your knowledge by maybe 1% after talking about our prospect on heavy oil. Now, Europe is different, guys, just to tell you. The rest of the world, they are completely different concept comparing it to what you hear in Europe, because they have their own region and they have their own, I think the society there, it's different than the younger population in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the panelists and the moderator for their valuable contributions. We will now move to the next section of our program with two presentations, which will focus on dive deep into fostering inclusive and diverse talent and bridging the gap between academia, industry, and government. For our first presentation, please join me in welcoming to the stage Zuwaina El-Menji, HR Business Partnering Manager at Petroleum Development Oman. Zuwaina, please join me on stage.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. And is that okay? A pleasure to be here. And I think the previous presentation really left off where I should be starting, with all the challenges we have with the new generation, millennials coming in, and those will impact us in every way and everywhere. So there's technology, but also there's culture of organization and everything. So my topic today is really talking about fostering inclusive and diverse talent in oil and gas. But it's really just not oil and gas, it's everywhere else. And when we talk oil and gas, like the indicated, Europe was different from Canada, Canada was different from the US. This also has different implication. In many other European countries, it's an aging population. In the GCC and Middle East, it's a very young population. So the dilemmas are quite different on how we face. So oil and gas depends where oil and gas that we're talking about, yeah. So if I could move to the next, is this? So this is a portrayal, and the background of my talk really is portraying what happens within Petroleum Development Oman as an example of an oil and gas industry that has embraced diversity and inclusion. And as you can see, normal diversity and inclusion would start off very much with data, and very much again data analytics and what happens to that. And you'll see a lot of the numbers. It will go with gender, it will go with nationalities, it will go with age. All these are different dissections of diversity. But indeed, after you take a record of all these, and if you set yourself a target of what you want to achieve, for example, you could say, instead of 13% females, we want 30% females. And what happens? So what if you get 30% females? Yeah. So I think the dimensions of diversity are very important to be clear to every organization on what you want to achieve from it. But you must know of the so what. If we do that, what are we really going to get? So a lot of studies have been done on diversity and inclusion, and it's been proven. It does impact the bottom line. It does improve the bottom line. But working on it, ladies and gentlemen, is not an easy task, as from our experience that we have seen. So if you look at our numbers, we look kind of okay. We have dimensions in every area, areas of improvement. And once we got to that level, really, we reflected on our journey. We've been on this journey the last 10 years. And I think many oil majors have been on this journey also with different challenges. So we reflected on this. And the one thing that we did was, we've always been proud. We have so many nationalities. We promote gender. We have, out of the 15 on our executive committee, we have 3 ladies over there. So there's representation of ladies, young, old, good representation. And we dared ourselves to go out and ask the community on how we are doing. And that was in 2015. We started it off. And the results were not too amazing. There were views from the community. And I think when you start talking inclusion, ladies and gentlemen, it's not about the numbers. It's really the view of the community. It's working together as a community. How do you get the best out of everybody? And I'm sure many of you who have sat here, the young, the technical, the non-technical, have been in forums, in engagements where you have had diverse views, and sometimes those diverse views really irritate you. You have had diverse thoughts from others who are younger or from different disciplines, and those irritate you too. So inclusion is a major game for us on saying how do we work inclusively to get the best out of everybody. And the way we have done this really is to ensure that diversity and inclusiveness is really a business imperative, not a nice to have anymore. We've had it as a nice to have before, we've had it as a tick of the numbers, but it really doesn't give you the results and doesn't work for you. Yeah. It needs to be supported by a formal governance, and formal governance meaning from the very top there's commitment, and since it's a business imperative, owned by PCD here, our PCD means People and Change Directorate. So we own it, but it has sponsorship and active participation from all senior leaders. I'll show a bit more about of that. Driven by business champions. These are the business champions. So these are people in the business, very senior, who are driving diversity and inclusiveness. Manage centrally and focus areas and actions. So each time and every time we have different venues where we get feedback and on how we're doing and how we're performing. That is very important, rather than sitting centrally thinking you know what is happening, and actually what the masses are thinking is totally different. So diversity, inclusiveness to work really needs a lot of engagement with your community. And community here also is a dilemma. Community, we work in oil and gas. We have our people on our corporate payroll, who is a smaller number, and then you have a bigger number as contractors. Yeah. Even your contractors, you must really tap on inclusion and make sure you work with them in an inclusive way. And it's not easy. We're still on that journey, but it's not an easy way because there are different management centers managing these people. But it's a role we are taking on, saying we will lead path to inclusiveness, that we can do that. So as you can see, after we had done our survey with our people, issues came up from our people saying they had issues with fairness. There were dilemmas, challenges with fairness. And fairness came in many different facets. It said in development, job opportunities, progression or promotion, performance rewards that people are given. There was a doubt on how we do it. So if you get that, you really have to address what is the doubt and how can you mitigate it. Mitigating some HR policies, procedures is not the easiest thing. There's never a win for everybody, but you have to meet sometimes in the mid-ground on how things can be done here. We went to gender balance, which is, I think, a dilemma in a lot of oil and gas industry. Some other industries have a different dilemma. It's not the female, it's the male that they need to inculcate more, but within the oil and gas, I think it's the female that have to come in. So this is leaders and education into gender balance, the infrastructure, and policies and processes. So if you look at the policies and processes, we used to advertise for jobs, and we would clearly articulate that these jobs are for male only. This is a practice that has stopped now. If there's a female who wishes to come in and compete, so be it, they can come in and compete and be considered for these ones. Infrastructure, and this is where inclusion comes in. You cannot hire female staff, put them in the field. We've never had them in the field and not put the right infrastructure to make sure they can contribute to their best. It takes a lot of teams to build the infrastructure into how it's working. And infrastructure, until to date, it's still a focus area. We have a number of females in the field, and we keep learning from them. What else can we do to make life better for them, to make them really contribute fully as females? Leaders in education, I cannot stop emphasizing, and I think the previous panel touched on education. Education is very, very important for the leaders, but also for the community. When we talk diversity inclusiveness at the beginning, most people understood it differently. What is it? And what is it going to bring us and all that? So we have done a lot of education for all our supervisors and all of our staff. So diversity and inclusiveness as education is very similar to safety in the oil and gas. Anybody who comes in does our safety training, whoever we hire, our existing staff, all have to go through the diversity and inclusiveness training. Yeah. The other one, and I think this time, sometimes this is a taboo, nobody wants to speak about it, but if you don't, then you're really not making the best of how people can work together. Anti-harassment and anti-bullying. This happens at schools, in organizations, everywhere, and you really have to address it. So this is one of the outcomes that came for us, that there is an existence of harassment and bullying in the organization. The levels it came out surprised us, but we knew it existed, but it's really getting to the levels of what it was. And this includes education, support services, and reporting. For many people with harassment and bullying, depending who they're raising the harassment and bullying against, we've put different channels to make sure we safeguard the employee. Many of them said they would not speak up because they were afraid of consequences. They were afraid to be known. But they've been safeguarded now that people can speak up, consequences can be taken, and I'm telling you, we're so serious about diversity and inclusiveness. It's a talk that happens every day. Somebody mentions it and everybody's attentive to listen to them. So harassment and bullying, it's really taken seriously in the organization. We cannot say we've removed all of it. It's very difficult, but the education and awareness and consciousness is in the organization to know we are serious about these 3 pillars. So these 3 pillars were just as a start for us. You can have so many, but these were the key ones that we were having. I'm sure many of you would have different focus areas that you'd have, but these are the 3 we do. And many people will hear gender balance, it will be the number of females. But you can get the number of females, but then what do you do and how do you make sure they contribute is really difficult. And you must work with them to understand how you can make them deliver. They have different challenges and different support mechanisms that are required. And last but not least in this one was communication and engagement. Yeah. So communication engagement is very important. You get feedback, but continuously you have to report back and you have to engage and understand what are the dilemmas that are coming up. And millennials not afraid at all to speak out. They sometimes give you challenges that you wish you did not hear about, but you have to really confront that and work on it. But at the same time, they're extremely helpful in giving you solutions of how it is going to work. Yeah. And the other thing that you can look at is the generations. We have 4 generations. The 5th one, I think, is coming in, kicking in. And it's not easy to manage 4 generations. And especially if the older generation is in the leadership roles, sometimes they don't connect to the younger generation. So the whole idea is to have younger people working in teams and supporting any changes that we're making, but most importantly, listening to them and steering and supporting them. Yeah, I just want to go back. So in here you see we put a people survey. So we have diversity and inclusiveness in our annual survey. It's happening right now to make sure we can track how we are doing as far as data goes. And over the last 4 years, we have improved year on and year on, but we have to keep at that. This is not a journey that you do 1 time or 2 times. It's a long-term journey. Like anything else you do in the oil and gas, this is something you have to sustain for a long time. Education, I think also at schools will be very important for an inclusive culture, educating our graduates that come out saying, without inclusiveness, you cannot survive in a working environment. Because some education institutions encourage competition of self rather than competing together and contributing as a team. So what will it take? Part of it was really to say, what's the DNA? And like I was starting to touch on it, really leadership commitment. If leadership does not walk the talk, and walk the talk is not once a year, twice a year, it's every day, because people are watching to the commitment we've made. And trust me, once you make the channels where you can get feedback, sooner or later people tell you feedback on leaders who are not walking the talk. So this is a big accountability for our leaders to walk the talk every day in everything they do. And they are coached, they're supported if they need support, And that support has to be given to them since it's a big change to them too. Accountability for inclusion is not only for leaders, it's for staff. We were surprised that some of the survey information that comes back to us indicated that staff had issues between themselves too on inclusion. It's not the easiest. Initially, it was leaders are not inclusive, are not engaging, are not being fair, are not being transparent. But right now, it's really shifted because of the education. They can see their challenges, dilemmas between themselves. So this is another focus area that we will have to work on further education on how can they work. And it will be very helpful if academia starts before people come into employment. Engagement, as I had said previously as part of communication, effective engagement communication, keep listening and keep asking. And this is the only way we can sustain this. It's very easy to lose momentum on it's quite a challenge because it's not a technical thing. You cannot touch it. You cannot touch and feel it every day. So you have to keep engaging and keep doing service to really understand. It's a long-term business imperative. It's a journey, and it will take time, and commitment is required from the board, senior leaders, and employees and communities, all to support inclusion. Inclusion is not a nice to have anymore. It's a business imperative. We all have to do it. Oil and gas has spoken about safety, 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 and HSE as a big theme. Diversity and inclusion is our next big theme that we really all have to focus on and make sure it works. And each time any of you sits in a meeting, sits in a room, talks to somebody, and you feel irritated a bit, please take time and reflect. It could be somebody has a different perspective to what you're saying, and you need to listen to seek clarification before you can write them off. There's a lot of writing off people sometimes saying, that person doesn't understand, that person is never cooperative, but it's really a different style. So bringing in gender, bringing in nationalities, but understanding diversity of thought, diversity of experience, it's really fundamental to how we do it. Many organizations hire people with different experiences, and when they walk in, we sometimes wish to delete all that experience and clone you to the way we do business. And you wonder, why did we buy that experience? So honoring what we bring in is very important, ladies and gentlemen. And I think the last one is just really a portrayal of the different flavors that we have. We've introduced work-life balance, agile working, that people can work from home for some of the days in the week as a start. And this is just a start. A lot of you will know that millennials do not want to be tied down into an office. So the freedom for them to work from any place as long as they contribute and deliver results is important. So we've started that. We have the gender balance in the field. We have females in the fields and totally supported by the whole organization. We've recently asked many more females who work with us here in Muscat, would they be willing to go to the fields? And amazingly, before it was no, and now many more are saying yes, they could consider going to the field, which is a big step change for us. Yeah, and promoting through staff magazines, engagements, our managing director's commitment to this is unwavering. He has been on this journey and he's committed, and he walks the talk everywhere he goes, so that's very important. And so do the other directors who handle different work streams and push this through for the last 3 to 4 years that we've been working on it. Not an easy journey, but if we all persevere, I think the world will be a better place and we'll get better returns from inclusion across the border in any diverse way. Yeah, that's all for me. If you have any questions, any clarifications, please, you can ask. I think. Okay, thank you so much for your time and attention. Yeah, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Zuwaina for her presentation. We now move to the second presentation. Please join me in welcoming to the stage
Hello, everyone. Okay. My talk will be mainly about the current platform that we're having when it comes to innovation. So if we look at the heritage of our country, of Oman, through the thousands of years ago, innovation was very central. And if you go around, you will find it in the forts that we have built, in the water channels that we have constructed, because there was a necessity, there was a pain area, and there was a need for it to happen. So the government has the Vision 2040, and the UN has established the Sustainable Development Goals. With the Vision 2040, they tried to align the major areas that they will tackle for the next 20 years with the Sustainable Development Goals. And what came in the heart of both is innovation. So innovation was very central. And the main pain areas that we are trying to look at as a country will come, energy will be the most important one of them. So energy, water, they are looking at the transportation, logistics, fishery, and fishery and transportation. So there was this energy forum, which happened in 2015, Oman Energy Forum. And from there, they came up with what is needed to be done to get more efficient energy and to get more production of energy while not depending mainly on the fossil fuel. So from there, they came with the Oman Industry Academia R&D Summit in 2016. And in 2016, and during that summit, there was finger pointing between the industry and the academia. The industry was saying the academia are not providing practical solutions, and the academia was saying the industry is not providing funding. So how can we talk to each other? And as you know, industry is very agile sector, and academia is a very slow and looking at blue sky. So there has been a need to bring them together in one platform, and this is where IJAD was created in 2018. So if we look at the triple helix between the government, industry, and academia, currently, the current situation in Oman, it is not a triple helix, it is a straight line. So the industry does not talk directly to the academia, very rarely, and they both talk through the government. So the government is the one who is actually pushing both industry and academia to try and come together. What we are trying to establish is this, collaboration between government, industry, and academia that will result at the end in a socio-economic growth. This is why our vision is to become a sustainable R&D platform by providing one-stop marketplace for R&D in Oman. So companies, when they come and they want to develop some form of new technology in Oman, which has been already tried, it's no longer blue sky, they usually would come to us. We are the one who will look at the industry and try to match them, to the industry and look at what is the best place where they can move forward with it. Our main focus area is TRL4 and beyond. So we do not focus on blue sky research. Whatever blue sky research, basic research, we don't look at it. We look at TRL4 till TRL9. Why do we do that? Because at the end, to develop a research which is directly affects the industry, it has to be applied research. This is where we only look at applied research that will deliver a business value to the industry. The main sectors that we are currently taking care of, oil and gas, renewable energy, sustainable energy, water, and environment. During this year, two major pillars came in as well. We did not include them in the slides, which is logistics and the bioeconomy. In terms of governance, we are currently an initiative that we will be registered, inshallah, soon to become an establishment. This is why currently we are chaired by a steering committee by Raul Restucci. Asyad is part of there, BIA is part of there, Ministry of Oil and Gas, and of course the TRC. These are the current pillars that we are working at: energy, oil and gas, water, and environment. Cuts across is IATI. IATI is the Institute of Advanced Technology Integration. So what this institute does, it does not reinvent the wheel, but it looks at existing technologies and try to integrate them together to bring a solution for the academia. We have the centers of excellencies. We are currently establishing several centers of excellencies. We started with water, inshallah will be tendered soon, and this is a collaboration between PDO and Haya Water. We are also establishing in the initial stage of negotiation on NORM, which is Naturally Occurring Radioactive Material Center of Excellence. We are doing the same thing when it comes to National Energy Efficiency Center and others as well, but they are all currently at the initial stage. We are developing them because we believe that to have a good research ecosystem, you need these centers of excellencies. And the center of excellencies, they will not only do research, but they will do also capacity building. They will provide services for the industry, and they will also look at standardization of the industry. There is also one that we are soon shooting the feasibility study for it, which is the Advanced Plastic Technology Research and Innovation Center, and that one is with collaboration with the ORPIC and Oman Oil Group. Business development, the BDM is mainly what currently I'm heading. We are required to become self-sustainable. To be self-sustainable, we have to have some form of revenue. We are not looking to become an establishment which depends on government money, neither on CSR. We want to have a business impact, so if we cannot sustain ourselves with our own operations, we would not be able to provide the same value for our clients. We are talking to many people. We are talking to the industry. We have several, almost around 30 companies. Some of them are group companies who are membership with EJAD. We have also the funding. We talk to IDO, we talk to OTF, we talk to RAFID. So when it comes to project funding, we also have one arm that we always try to reach with projects that have R&D elements, and incubators. For those projects that will be spinned off as private entities, we incubate them in one of these incubators. This is our main plan. In 2018, we established EEJAT. I will elaborate more into it. We do also the consultancy, business technology mapping. We have currently we are doing one consultancy with one of our clients on the effect of fourth industrial revolution on their workforce. There are many reports. If you go and look at this aspect, you will find the reports from McKinsey, reports from World Economic Forum. But what we look at mainly, we go job by job, skill by skill, and how that will be impacted by the fourth industrial revolution. Then we do the skilling, the upskilling plans for them, and we provide it. Spinning off, soon we will be spinning off a project called the Wave Glider, which is an unmanned vehicle that you can leave it in the sea for more than 1 year. It harnesses the energy from the solar power and from the wave power. And then what it does is that it takes water samples, it does all the analysis remotely and sends the data back to the station. So people in the station, they don't have to go to the sea. They can take the data and analyze it and take they become proactive if there is any issue. Who is interested on this? Mainly oil and gas industry. with all the influence that's come from the ships. We have the fishery industry. They are also very much interested because of the red tides. We have also the أرصاد الجوية ما في بالإنجليزي. The weather forecast with all the cyclones that are happening. You can send the wave glider inside the cyclone and take some measures that will give you more accurate forecasting on where it will move. This is in collaboration with Helmholtz in Germany and with the Liquid Robotics, which is a small company currently bought by Boeing. Hopefully by 2021, we will have our Center of Excellences operating, and then we more, go into commercialization and become self-sustainable by 2023, inshallah ta'ala. So talking about EEJAD, which is currently the main platform and our backbone, it's a website, a platform. What happens in this platform is that the industry, the members of our industry, they post their challenges. So whatever challenge they have, they post it. The academia, the whole academic community will be able to see these challenges and propose a solution. Where we fit in, we go from A to Z. So we look at the proposal coming from the industry. We make sure that the language that it is wrote with is something that the academia will understand. And then we allow it to go and be posted. If it doesn't, we go back to the industry and tell them, you know what, probably you need to change this, probably you need to add this. Then once the proposal comes back from the academia, we also do our own quality check, that whatever they are proposing is in line with the industry, what the industry is looking for, and it is in a language that the industry then understands. Once they achieve an agreement, they sign a contract and the research starts. We monitor the research as well. So we have a technical committee that will oversee the research, that it achieves its milestones, and it is in accordance with what the industry wants or what that company wants. Because let's be frank, as researchers, sometimes we get pulled away from the main target that we were asked because we can see another door of knowledge is opening somewhere. Yet what we tell them that, no, please, focus on this now. Focus on what the customer wants or the client wants, which is the industry, which is this practical solution. Once it is closed, once the research results are conveyed, we don't stop there. We see, is there any cross-learning with the industry that can be shared? If yes, we do that sharing. We look at, is there any spin-offs that we can have, new company, IP, or something that we can do with it. So we don't stop at where we close the research, we look at the multiplier effect as well. These are the main services that we are currently providing through our platform, and mainly the industrial challenges, which is very active. We also started research ideas as well. So now not only the industry will post their challenges, but also the researchers, some of them, they may have an idea. So rather than going and knocking doors on each company, they just post it in our website. And the industry will be able to look at it and they will be able to say, okay, I like this research. I will talk about some of the things that we have seen during our 1-year journey. We've seen that it is not only industry-academia collaboration that happened. Industry-industry collaboration happened as well. Because some of these challenges the industry are able to see. So they said, you know what? I think we have the same challenge as well. Can we join hands in research? And they join hands and both of them, they will do one research. What we have done as well is academia collaboration. Some of the challenges which were put through the platform, we know that we can bring 2 academic institutes with 2 different sets of capabilities. If they join hands together, they can deliver better for the industry. And we did that with one of the projects with BP. We brought Sultan Qaboos University and Geotech in one common project, and they delivered, and they currently delivering to them. Inshallah, they will sign sometime in October when they finish all the all the collaboration papers. We are also recently, we are just on the beta version on the international collaboration. What we want to do now is to take it one step further, to open up for international universities. So the challenge comes in if it does not get the proper solution or proper expression of interest from the local academia, it will open automatically to international universities, and they will be able to see. Last year we had almost more than, this is a little bit out of date, almost more than 40 challenges and around 100 expression of interest proposals. So it is on average of 2 to 1. Some of them we have seen 6 to 1. So 6 proposals to 1 challenge. Frankly, when we started, our main fear was, do we have enough researchers to generate the ideas that the industry wants? And we were actually amazed with the kind of ideas and kind of solutions that our local researchers are bringing. And we see that as well with our clients, with our industry. They thought that we don't have the local capabilities to face these challenges and to provide solutions. When they tried and when they put their challenges, solutions came, and they said, okay, I didn't know that this researcher was in this university and he has this capacity to run the research that will provide me the solution. So it opened up. We started to see dialogue. We started to bring people together and provide actual solutions which impact the business. We are moving forward, and what we intend to do is not only to bring solutions. What we intend to do is to create an ecosystem, research ecosystem, to bring innovation to Oman, and to actually create, spin off the wheel of innovation in the country. As a country, with our neighbors as well, for decades we have been technology consumers. I think it's about time to become technology producers, where we don't only affect the local market, but we also affect the international community. And this is what we intend to do. Some of the ideas of some of the companies, they brought ideas. Today we see them impacting not only the industry in Oman, but the international industry as well, mainly referring to Glasspoint. So when the idea came to use renewable energy to produce heavy oil, it was a very wild idea. Today it's no longer an idea, it's reality. And rest assured that we intend not to stop at Glasspoint and not to stop at that only project. We will look for others, and we will bring others, and we will bring more innovation to Oman. And we will create innovation ourselves. We are ready to join hands, and as I think Nasser said, the train is moving, and you either catch up or you are left behind. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Dr. Al-Bahlani for his presentation. I'm pleased to advise this concludes the first part of the morning, and would like to welcome all delegates to lunch, which is hosted in the exhibition hall. We will be reconvening in the auditorium at 2:20 to start the next session on the significance of finance and investment in oil and gas. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation, and I now invite you to enjoy your lunch.